Robbie Bent, welcome to the show. Thank you for making the time. I know you're super busy, just had a baby and opening new locations everywhere. How does it feel to have so many spinning plates?
Some days exciting, some days fearful, some days angry, a mix. Trying to balance my emotions has been quite challenging for me. I've never been so busy and also needing to be a leader of so many people, plus balance my family life and continuously feeling like I'm not doing excellent at any of the things. I'm not working enough. I'm not a good enough dad. I'm not a good enough partner. Being sad that I'm kind of angry all day and like upset that like things aren't going well. And yeah, but on the flip side, super excited. I've never really built anything before that had this much success and that was as much a part of me. And so putting something out in the world that's helping so many people that I'm proud of is extremely exciting. And some moments, walking with my son and watching him walk for the first time, I'm kind of like teeter over, watching him, how he looks at squirrels and birds in the park when I push him and just stops is amazing. And so it's just life is very full, but mostly with amazing feelings of like love and contentment and meaning.
I love your honesty and I love the way you share things. And that's why I wanted to have this conversation. And I also wanted to tell you that before I left, I'm in LA today. I just arrived here, but a couple of days ago, I went to an ice bath and sauna place in Brisbane. And I finished my ice bath and I came into the sauna. And the sauna was full. And there's this one guy that looked at me and went, "Dude, you're a weapon. How long were you in the ice bath for?" And then everyone was like, "Oh yeah, I was looking at him. He was looking at his nails. I was like, "Why were you all staring at me?" I'm like, "Because you were not there. You were somewhere else. Your body was inside." I'm like, "Yeah, because I was listening to Othership and I was doing my breath work." And I have to say, Othership, what you've built is absolutely phenomenal and must be easily one of the things that can get someone like you who was feeling overwhelmed like myself and having all these spinning plates to come out a different person through it. Do you feel that? Do you see that? Do you see the effects of what you've created?
I think for me, a good reminder when things are difficult, and an example today, I found out we're delayed at one of our spaces 2 months just before this call, so I kind of showed up 2 minutes late, a little bit frazzled, dealing with, okay, we now have to change our guide training. Our budget is off. This might impact our bank loans. It's going to impact our PR. All the work we've done the last 3 months now has to be delayed and recalibrated. And it's like, oh, fuck, whose fault is this? Who's accountable? And the reality is it doesn't matter, And so I go from those moments of anger is coming up. That's a natural one for me to, when I'm scared, to feel more powerful, is to go to anger and like, oh, I need to, but it doesn't matter. Like, that's just the reality and we have to move forward. And so tonight at 9 p.m., I'll actually go into our space and we're having a night. We have 20 new guides that we've onboarded. One of the most amazing things recently was when we first hired, it was, whoever wants to be a guide, and a guide in our space is somebody who creates the performance, the class, towel waves, breath work, a whole bunch of different items happening in the sauna. So you can think of this as like the shepherd, the instructor. And, when we first were hiring, nobody. It was just like, hey, anyone who's interested, please come. If you've got no experience, we'll train you. And this time 75 people applied for the role. And we're super excited. Like, wow, I can't wait to do this. Amazing that you're teaching us to do this. And my co-founders put together a massive, almost like a yoga certification guide training program. And so, tonight I'm going in, it's 20 new guides who've just started. They're all super excited. They prepared on auditions for the classes that they want to run. And we're teaching them how to guide an ice bath. And so, from wow, I feel really stressed. Is this stuff going to work? This was really bad news. Taking that into, no, okay, I'm about to feel great and like use the product. And so when things are tough, using the product generally helps.
Yeah, it's been absolutely amazing. I mean, I've been ice bathing for a while, but ice bathing with breath work is on a new level. You literally come out another person. Like, I've never come out the same person as I've gone in. And I have to thank you for that, because I think about you every day and I use Othership and it's such a great product. So let's talk about that. How did it come about and what's the growth been like for the Othership app in particular? Because it's reaching more people than your physical space can.
Yeah, my wife and I moved back to Toronto and we're really looking for a new community. Prior to living in Toronto, I struggled with drugs and alcohol. And so as a result, we moved back here. I'd been sober for 4 years, and we'd been living in San Francisco and Berlin, and just thought like, oh, are we going to get sucked into bad habits again? And we decided to build an ice bath in our backyard with a few friends. It's just a way to cultivate like a strong, healthy community. Super easy, residential street in a backyard. You would open the gate and there was an ice bath anyone could use. It was free. And every night we would host events. So it would be, campfire, ice bath.
Wow.
And we had to learn how to guide people through. Because for many people, they'd never tried something like this before. This was 4 or 5 years ago. And we started experimenting with different sound healing modalities, breathing practices, visualizations, a number of techniques you'd maybe see in group therapy. And it just became so popular. There was a WhatsApp group of 500 people, and people just coming every night, hanging out. People were dating, becoming friends. And then when winter came along, it was too cold outside in Toronto, Canada, where I'm from. And so we converted our garage. We had a kind of this empty garage woodworking space that we converted into a sauna, ice bath, and a back-end booking platform. And that grew organically to over 1,000 people coming every night. And so myself and my 4 partners would each work 2 nights-ish a week, folding the towels, cleaning the space, guiding people through, just practicing, honing our craft. And through that practice, we learned that, wow, you can really do classes in these modalities. So you can have a sauna in the dark with an anger release. You can do breathwork together as a couple in the ice bath where you're gazing into each other's eyes and then give each other a hug. You can do a gratitude practice that you might usually do on Headspace in the sauna together while all smelling essential oils and seeing what memories are triggered. And so we just played around for, almost 2 years throughout COVID with just different styles of programming, and learned that this was a really awesome way for people to do emotional work in the sauna and ice bath. And so at that point, we realized there was a business here, at least demand. And so we self-funded the first Othership space. We signed a lease. COVID was going on. Canada was quite intense about the restrictions. And we just thought that there was going to be a lot of demand for a business that was focused on, mental health, community, pushing yourself, resilience, health and wellness. And so we signed the lease, took the risk. And I remember people were saying, oh, you're crazy. This will never work. People will never group sauna again. And then we signed the lease and built the first version, mostly as something that we really wanted for ourselves, with the idea that, Thursday, Friday, Saturday night, you could hang out at night in a social aspect without alcohol, with performers, musicians, live shows. And then throughout the day, there would be classes. And the classes are mixed. We have 25 different sessions at different classes, and they follow. Some are, more down-regulating, meditative, sound bath style. Some are more up-regulating, dunking your head in the ice bath, vocalizations. They feel more akin to a workout, and some are similar to group therapy with deep sharing. And that all came from just, testing, talking to customers. Someone would come in and say, oh, I'm really struggling with a breakup. And we would make a class for breakup. And then the app was something that during COVID, we couldn't offer the space. We allow people to come to the garage in their own social bubbles. And people were really scared. So we just started doing Zoom breathwork sessions for free. And the Zoom breathworks became very successful. So we'd put the recordings on YouTube, and then people really liked the YouTube. So we did an online course, and the online course went really well. And people were saying, oh, I'm using this every day. So we looked into it and we built an app and launched the app in parallel. It's just a way to, we create every single session on the app is created internally, myself, my co-founders, and, the music's selected, it's mixed and mastered, the script is written. And they're just things that we're personally interested in. And so it was an outlet for us for creativity. And each one is almost like a little work of art based on something a customer's asked for, something we're personally interested in. And so it was really a huge labor of love and fun to put the app out into the world.
And the reason I'm obviously having you on the show is like you've done so much of work creating Audible series for people to actually change their state of mind, and actually not only mind, change their state in general. And I am a huge fan of using your voice to communicate and be creative and put your message out there. Let's talk about how you are using podcasts in Othership, because you're doing a great job with advertising your work on other podcasts. How did you start with that? What is that like? How's it going? How do you structure the offering? Can you give us a breakdown on that?
Yeah, so there was an amazing article in the first round review from Tom Griffin at Levels, and they were one of the brands I've seen most successfully use the podcast strategy. I think they were on 200 podcasts in 6 months, something like that. And it's just a very effective way to tell a long form story. And so if you're a founder of a business, what makes your business unique is your story, and exactly like we created this to solve our own need because we're so passionate about it. And so podcast is a much better form. It was very hard, what we found with Othership, to tell the story on Instagram. So what happens is people see short bites and it's like, oh, it's a really cool space to go. It's kind of like Soho House. Some people are like, oh, that's really cool. It's kind of like an Equinox. Some see it and say it's a sauna and ice bath. It's a recovery center. And so I might ask 5 people who've seen our Instagram what they think our business is, and they all have a different idea of what it actually is, because there is no such thing in the history of the world as an emotional regulation class taking place in a sauna and ice bath. And so sauna and ice bath classes are brand new in the first place. Like, people have been to bathhouses for 2 hours, but the idea of combining those into a class was new. And then a lot of the emotional regulation techniques we're using, turning off the lights in the sauna, bringing to mind a moment of anger, screaming it out while a gong is playing, like, that is completely new. And so how do you even explain that? And so podcasts were a much more effective medium because I can sit and talk with you about, okay, this started as a community driven thing around health. It then became a community driven thing around like mental health. And then we started implementing a bunch of techniques from therapy. Oh, also there's like a nighttime social for people who aren't drinking. So it became a medium. There's a really good maxim from a famous advertiser, David Ogilvy, like probably the most famous of all time. And it's like, tell, don't sell. And funny enough, some of the most successful ads of all time are like very long form content explaining what you're doing. And so when someone hears that, like, wow, you know what? Their team they went to 70 bathhouses worldwide to come up with this concept. Oh, they developed a 100-hour teacher training program. They are so detailed. Even the smell in the space we created from scratch by combining 4 different cedar wood essential oils. The space itself, we tested 40 tiles so that you're meant to go through the space with no sandals because it's a very kinesthetic experience. The lighting palette was designed to create safety because people are in your bathing suit. And so I just have found in this medium, when I can tell those stories, people are like, wow, so much care has went into the design of this. It doesn't just happen by accident. Every little detail has been thought through and tested with thousands and thousands of customers. And so there's no way to really tell a long form story without podcasting. So one was getting out the long form story, I thought was like very powerful. And then 2 is, how do you actually do that? And that Levels article I mentioned was something I read. I reached out to them and said, like, hey, how'd you get on all these podcasts? And then just copied that. And so very aggressively made lists of 100, 200, 300, 400 podcasters and asked for warm intros to all of them. And so we never actually used an agency, and we never paid for any of our podcasts outside of one. I think we were on 80 or 85. And the idea was really telling a story that was compelling and solving a problem, and then getting a warm intro to get on the podcaster's radar. And so that was quite successful for us. And it was a great way to talk about both the app and the physical space.
So how do you see people that come into your space or come into Othership that have come through a podcast? Because you're obviously doubling down on the podcast idea. Is there a correlation to what is happening in the business as a result of you going on podcasts?
So the podcasts are generally more, I think you really need a digital product to make it worthwhile, something that can be purchased then and there. So the issue with the podcast for a physical space is that most people can't go. So like, oh, that's a cool story, I hear about it, but it's not the best focus unless you're focused on like Toronto-based podcasts. So you need some type of digital process that you can sell to make it worthwhile. And so for us, we have an app that's done quite well. And the really good thing about the app is, anybody can use it. So it's a fantastic platform to talk about. But in addition, it's kind of free marketing for the physical space. So we have this app that we can sell through the podcast, but then people can hear about the space as well. And for most brick and mortar spaces, it's kind of free advertising in that way.
At the start of this conversation, you spoke about control. You spoke about how we feel like we are losing control, especially when we plan something and it doesn't turn out well. And we have all these different emotions that come up when it doesn't go according to plan. How, as business owners, as creatives, I mean, I would consider yourself a creative, just like myself, that's learning to build a business around the creation. I mean, I'm not a business person trying to be creative. I'm a creative becoming a business person so that I can sustain my creation. What do you think? I mean, because of your success, what do you see if you had to look back at the things that made your creation sustainable with the business activity that you did?
You just really have to care about the product you're building. And so for me, I use it every day. I'm either doing breath work or in the physical space. This was never meant to be a business. I think building a business over a 3-year time horizon is almost impossible. If you said, hey, I have to start this now and be successful in 3 years, there's so much competition. If you say, hey, I'm doing this because it is play for me and I enjoy it, and what I create, I want people to use. Okay, it doesn't matter to me if it's successful in 3 years or 5 years, 7 years, or 10 years. This is the thing I want to be doing. And so on a Friday night, if I'm making a breath work or thinking about an ecstatic dance or looking at the 5th or 50th or 500th design of the New York studio, that's what I want to be doing. Yeah. And so there's one is like the work is play in a lot of ways because you're creating. And there's a lot of shit also, like nobody wants to be signing leases and reviewing 150-page lease documents over and over, or doing continued performance reviews, or negotiating with vendors, or doing, there's stuff that's not fun. And so that's been the overwhelming part, is as we grow, when you start, it's like so fertile and it's just all ideas and like MVPs, and you're seeing people's faces, and it's so exciting. And as you grow, the problems really grow as well. And so, the reminders to me are like, do I really care about this thing? So when there's problems, I still fucking love it, and there's enough in there that I'm driven to do, and is it play? And then, can you experience it yourself? So for me, as I mentioned, I'm going tonight. If I get too stuck in the business, which happens if we're raising money, when we're in builds, when we're launching, it's quite intense. It's like, okay, I'm just going to go in the space. I'm going to meet someone new there. I'm going to talk to them. I'm going to do one of the classes and be like, wow, I can't, look around and maybe 2 or 3 people are crying. And it's like, fuck, I can't believe we're having that kind of impact. My co-founders were at Burning Man last week, and they did a live event, and, somebody was there they'd never met before from Chicago who had an Othership tattoo on his arm. And he just came up to them and was like, oh my God, like, I can't believe, are you Harry and Amanda? I've been listening to you every night. You've changed my life. I've like got this thing tattooed on my arm. And so that was a pretty cool thing to hear, is that people are like out there that we don't even know, that, this has changed their life, and you meet them in person. And, another one was somebody drove across the country from Seattle, 4 or 5 days to Toronto to do a retreat here. They were struggling with a breakup and did a 5-day self-made Othership retreat where they did 2 or 3 classes a day for 5 days to, transform or get over that pain of the breakup. And so hearing stuff like that, like, holy fuck, this is awesome. So it's a mix. It's super hard. It's super fun. Some days are great. Some days are not. I've heard this quote from Mark Andreessen that entrepreneurship is either euphoria or terror, but never in between. So it just, depends on the day. Like there was a day when I thought we were going to run out of money 6 months ago, and I was, oh my God, it's never going to work. We've signed this lease in New York. I'm going to lose my house. It's just going to fail. And it was a nightmare, and I woke up sweating, and like, that's not true. And that's not what's going to happen. But it was, there's just these moments of euphoria and moments of fear when building anything, I think.
That's interesting you say all that, because, in the spirit of, actually, it's because you're so vulnerable that I'm going to be so vulnerable. Last night, I mean, it's a 13.5-hour flight from Australia to LA, and I was in business class feeling horrible amongst the elite people, like, sitting there in comfort, feeling really down. And then I started beating myself up about the fact that my life is just so good. Why am I in this mood? And one breathwork session fixed that. And you're having more than just a small impact. I just want to say that. I feel like a lot of us, I mean, you more than someone like myself, because of what you've created and how many people are using it, is just, and how many people are getting a benefit straight after, like even a 3 or 4 minute breathwork session is just, it's just crazy, to the point that even if I don't have my phone on me and I feel a little bit down, I can create my own breath work to get out of that, or at least be in a better space than in my head. You mentioned work being play, and for a lot of us creative entrepreneurs, work is play. But when things get hard and the business side comes around, when we could be a great breathwork person, a great podcaster, a great lawyer, or a great mechanic, but we still don't know about recruitment. We still don't know about culture. We're still learning about operations. We're still learning about money raising. There's so many different aspects to business. What's the secret to staying in that space for long enough that you can overcome it?
I think asking for help and really understanding people who've come before you. So, an example is in our business model is quite similar to fitness. And so I really made a point to try to get in touch with the founders of SoulCycle and ask them how they launched, how would they open a new city, how they would do leases. I did the same with Rumble and other Equinox, and would search for people on LinkedIn, see if I could pay them $500 for an hour and just try to ask them questions about what it was like and what the parallels are. Another way is just to do that with business. There's a podcast I listen to called Founders, and it's a character. His name is David Senra, and he reads biographies, like amazing biographies, every week on founders, and then quickly summarizes the gems from the biography in like a 45-minute, 1 hour soundbite. And so I'll listen to those frequently and see, how did Steve Jobs think about these problems? How did the founder of Four Seasons, the founder of Ritz-Carlton, the founder of In-N-Out, the founder of Trader Joe's, all other brick and mortar businesses, how did they start their businesses? What are some of the similar learnings? And so I think the point is whether you're doing it with podcasts that are free and available to anyone, or whether you're doing it with a network that you have or get. And I started with no network in health and fitness and just was grinding out, reaching out to people on LinkedIn, reaching out for warm intros. I think that the main point is like look for help, ask for help, and all those things you mentioned. Of course, you don't know how to do them, and so you need to find somebody who does. And generally in business, something to remember is like your product is unique, so nobody else is offering sauna and ice bath based emotional wellness classes, but a million people have done recruiting and fundraising, built financial segments, built operations teams. That stuff is all the same, and there's best practices for it. So you don't need to reinvent the wheel. The only place you need to reinvent the wheel is your specific product.
Such a huge point. I did not even think that you would say asking for help, because it's one of the things that I am not necessarily good at, and I feel like I'm learning a little bit to ask. Do you feel like in general entrepreneurs are not good at asking for help?
Depends. It's very situation specific, but like, for example, one of Steve Jobs' greatest entrepreneur of all time, main things was he would ask for help. And there's a story of him at 12 years old calling Bill Hewlett, the founder of Hewlett Packard, and saying like, hey, I can't get this computer to work. What should I do? And he got his first internship by just calling him up. So, which I thought was like a funny story to remember of, if even the greatest entrepreneur of all time is asking for help, you can too. Yeah. And in my first business, I never asked for help. I was 24. I raised a large amount of funding. We built a wireless, kind of like a Google Fi competitor. So a SIM card for your phone where you could travel globally and not pay roaming. And I thought I could just do it myself. I thought, I'm smart, I can figure it out. I'm smart, I can figure it out. I'm going to figure this out. I'm going to work so hard. And the company ended up failing after 4 years. It was very, very difficult for me. I had to fire 100 people. At the time, I thought like my life is over. And, what have I learned? I've wasted my whole career. And the reality is, what I learned from this is that instantly you can ask for help. And so an example is, however long it takes me to figure out something, if I just talk to the best person in the world at that thing for 30 minutes, I could have the answer for the most part. And so now I'm very, when we're going to figure out a billing platform to use, we're going to figure out a city to launch in. It's just, who's the best real estate broker? Who are the best 3 real estate brokers in the US that I should talk to get some feedback? And a lot of times, problems that have been solved before can be solved quite quickly. The first thing I'll do when a new problem comes is like, who will know the answer to this? And how do I find and this is the power of having a big network. If you have a big audience on Twitter and a podcast, if you're someone like Tim Ferriss, you can just ask, hey, what's the best way to improve my sleep? Bam, you're going to get a ton of answers, And so that's the value of having an audience or a network, is you can ask and get responses pretty quickly, much more quickly than like doing it yourself a lot of times. Now, counterpoint to that is, for certain things, you're just going to get advice that is not super relevant to you. And so generalized advice should actually be avoided. And so in my case, an example might be, how should we grow Othership across the US? Nobody knows. For me, it's like, how fast do I want to grow? How much do I want to work? What cities are important to me? What's my customer like? So if I listen to 4 people, I'll get 4 different answers. And so I think there's certain things where advice is helpful to a degree, but then you have to make the decision. And so asking for help at first, when I'm trying to solve a problem, gives me sort of the lay of the land, but then making the decision yourself is quite important as well.
Yeah. So taking responsibility over the decisions you're making, despite the advice you're getting from different places. And when you ask for help, is ultimately down to you, the responsibility of executing.
Yeah, and like sometimes you ask for help and somebody knows something specific, and wow, that's really good advice, and I can use it instantly. Sometimes, like we were looking at running paid ads on Instagram and looking at working with an agency, and I talked to 11 people about, hey, should we run Instagram ads for our app? And each agency, I got a different response, of what we should do, and like completely different. Some like, you have to do ads. It's the only way you're going to scale your business. You should focus immediately on this and spend as much money as you can. And others who are like, there's no way you're going to make ads work. You should focus on SEO, like completely different. And so that's a case where like, oh, okay, well, what's the decision? How do I make it? Because you might have smart people who just have different opinions. So asking for help's not always so easy. Some things are easy and some things aren't.
Totally. Well, I want to respect your time and land on this note because I think it is important for us as business owners to put our message out there. And I feel like with a lot of us, we might be the world's best kept secret. I mean, in different ways, right? How would you recommend today in 2023 business owners, founders get themselves out there more?
So funny because we just talked about giving advice. And so the advice I give for 1 out of 10 might be good. And for the other 9 is probably not effective. So I think for me is it's like, where are your customers? Who are your customers? And how can you find them? And so the first thing is, can you find 100 customers who love what you do? And can you ensure that what you're building is exactly what they want? And before I tried to get my message out there, I would ensure my message is right. And so an example of how we did that is, an ice bath in a backyard, going out around the neighborhood, telling people we were offering, free events, looking at who came back 10 times, who came back 20 times. Okay, there's 50 people who've been back 20 times. How do they describe this? Oh, I feel alive. Oh, I feel community and connection. Oh, I feel committed to doing this. I feel awe. We took all that language, and that is how we then describe our product. And so once you have a product that is working, core customer, a way they describe that language, you can then start to think about how do we advertise at greater scale.
And Othership, where does that name come from? Is it hard to explain because the name is Othership? It's not what it says on the tin. That's why it's hard to like explain to other people when they see Othership?
No, I think it's just the experience needs to be felt. And so it's very difficult to see and understand what a kinesthetic experience is, the same way in which people take psychedelic medicines. Once they feel them, oh yeah, I know what that is. But it's hard to explain to somebody who's never done an emotional wellness class with that kind of change in state in the body. But once you've done it, the name itself is very clear. So the idea is that we are all on a journey together on the Othership. And this word other is often, we've kind of reclaiming that we're not one or us, it's all other, and we're all on this ship together. And the really nice thing about it is, it also means partnership, mentorship, apprenticeship, allyship, relationship, companionship. It's kind of like whatever you choose to be working on in life. And because we call it space for transformation, it's that we're all on a journey together on this ship, working on whatever it is we need to work on. So it's just an invitation to join a community, to work on yourself and, be part of the Othership.
I love it. I love it for so many different reasons. I'm a computer scientist by trade, and with artificial intelligence taking over everything, really, I feel the only way for us as a species to not be extinct is for us to collaborate and be as one. And if we don't start to learn to do that quick, we're obviously not going to be the most intelligent species on the planet anymore. But if the most intelligent species on the planet, who were us, did a lot of things to ecosystems because we were the most intelligent, artificial intelligence is going to come along and do the same to us. And I feel that the only way for us to change is to get on board the Othership and have the same sort of values and belief systems that you've inculcated and build a beautiful business around. Robbie, this is amazing. Thank you so much for the wisdom and the vulnerability, because usually it's me being vulnerable and then the guest opens up. You flip this whole thing over on me from my first question. So thank you for everything. Thank you for Othership. I'm a huge fan.
Thanks, Ronsley. Appreciate you making time for me.
Thanks, brother. Thanks, man.